The Legend of Zelda is one of the most iconic series in all of gaming, and also happens to be my personal favorite. I've set out to rank every main series game and compile the ultimate Zelda series ranking. In this video, we're taking a look at the game originally released on the Nintendo Gamecube, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. We will be scoring the game across these 10 categories. Each category will be scored from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. At the end, we will average all the scores to come up with an official score. Both the GameCube and Wii U version of the game are being considered in the scoring. I know the Wii U version cleans up a few things, but ultimately the scores for each category will be uniform. Now let's get started. Our story begins after the conclusion of the Future Era, or Adult Link era of Ocarina of Time. Ganon was defeated and then sealed away by the sages, however he still retained the Triforce of Power. Hundreds of years pass and Ganon breaks free and brings terror to the land of Hyrule. The people of Hyrule expected the hero to appear again, but he never shows up. With no choice left, the people of Hyrule plead to the gods for help. The gods flood the land of Hyrule to stop Ganon, and the people of Hyrule seek refuge in the mountaintops and settle new lands. Generations later, we come to present time. Link awakens to realize it's his birthday, and he's gifted a telescope by his sister Ariel. And as tradition for boys who become the same age as the hero of time, they must wear the same garb that the legendary hero once wore. When Link tries out his telescope, he notices a large bird known as the Helmarock King carrying a girl. A pirate ship following behind this bird fires a cannon, striking it and causing the mysterious girl to fall into the forest. Link obtains a sword and ventures to save the young girl, who we come to know as Tetra. Following Link's rescue of Tetra, Link's sister goes to the bridge to meet them, and the Helmarock King accidentally kidnaps her instead. Link then makes it his mission to set out and find his sister. He makes his way to the Forsaken Fortress, where he learns his sister was likely being kept. Link fails to rescue her and ultimately washes ashore at Windfall Island. There he meets a living boat known as the King of Red Lions. His new companion guides him to learn the fate of Hyrule and the evil known as Ganon. Link learns of the quest he must embark on to save his sister and defeat the evil, including collecting 3 Goddess Pearls necessary to visit the kingdom below the surface. Link acquires the 3 pearls and succeeds in completing the Trial of the Gods. Now deemed worthy, Link descends down to Hyrule Kingdom below. Hyrule, while underwater, is still in a frozen or sealed state. Link pulls the Master Sword from its pedestal and reawakens the land of Hyrule. Now with the Master Sword in hand, Link heads back to the Forsaken Fortress to take on Ganondorf. Link is able to rescue his sister and take down the Helmarock King, but he ultimately fails to defeat Ganon and learns that the Master Sword is not yet fully powered. Link and Tetra journey back down to Hyrule to learn that Link's companion, the King of Red Lions, is actually the King of Hyrule. Tetra learns that she is the descendant of the royal family and thus Princess Zelda. In the final stretch of his journey, Link awakens the Earth and Wind Sages to fully power the Master Sword and gather the 8 pieces of the Triforce of Courage left behind by the Hero of Time. With the full might of the Master Sword and the full Triforce of Courage, Link makes his way through Ganon's tower. Now ready to confront Ganondorf himself, the Demon King has a rare moment of humanization, detailing the motivations that were the catalyst for his violent actions and ultimate turn to evil. He talks of the struggle of being raised in the harsh desert lands, while Hyrule Kingdom was allowed to prosper. Ganondorf makes short work of Link and Tetra, and assembles the Triforce and is ready to make his wish when out of nowhere! RKO out of nowhere! The King of Red Lions steps in and wishes to drown Hyrule. He did this with the vision to give Link and Tetra a new future with a new land. Ganondorf, in his madness, now vows to destroy Link. Link and Tetra eventually successfully team up and put an end to Ganondorf, who now lay at the bottom of the ocean with the Master Sword still buried in his forehead. And in the end, Link and Tetra sail off with their pirate crew to find a new land to call their own. The story of The Wind Waker is one of my favorites of any Zelda game. In my opinion, this is the best follow-up to Ocarina of Time, and technically, there's about 4 of those. I feel it finds the perfect balance of referencing the history of Ocarina of Time and also showing new and interesting characters. I'm giving the story a 5 out of 5. It's the perfect follow-up to Ocarina of Time. Link, Tetra, and the pirates are such fun and expressive characters, and we also meet other fun characters along the way like Makar and Medley. We also have, in my opinion, the best version of Ganondorf in any game from a story perspective. In The Wind Waker, the majority of the game is set in the Great Sea. In this vast ocean, there's 49 islands or collections of islands to visit. There are several core islands you visit that are beautiful and well fleshed out, such as Link's hometown of Outset Island, Dragon Roost Island, Windfall, and the Forest Haven. There are of course many more islands to explore and treasures to collect. Aside from islands, there are submarines and pirate outposts to explore if you really want to go in deep. The Great Sea truly is massive, and it takes quite a while to sail from one end of the map to the other. Even on the Gamecube version, the game packs some impressive draw distances and scenic views. There's also the land of Hyrule below the sea, which in appearance and concept is really cool. Unfortunately, aside from story purposes, there really isn't much to explore or do here. I'm giving the world a 4 out of 5. The Great Sea has a lot to do and explore. There's a ton of memorable locations and islands to explore. There are just a few things that hold it back from a perfect score. While the Great Sea is vast and we do have some awesome islands around, there are times where it can feel pretty empty. There's quite a number of islands that feel like wasted potential where there may only be something such as a heart piece to get, and then you can basically ignore that island for the rest of the game. Going along with wasted potential, some of the islands themselves can be really disappointing. Did we really need 6 island spots taken up by reef islands? Just a few more interesting islands or being able to further explore Hyrule beneath the ocean would have without question put this game over the top. At this point, almost everyone knows the infamous story of Wind Waker's art style, but in case you don't, let me explain. Space World 2000 featured a tech demo that would showcase the capabilities of the Nintendo GameCube. There we would see a demo of a sword fight between Link and Ganondorf. Zelda fans had their expectations set and were ready for a more realistic version of the Ocarina of Time art style. Well, when we finally got a look at Wind Waker at E3 a few years later, many fans were not happy to say the least. At this time, I myself was a little disappointed, but once I actually picked up the Wind Waker and was able to play it, my concerns instantly washed away. Wind Waker's art style is absolutely stunning and timeless. The footage you see is of course from the Wii U HD version, but even on the GameCube this game still looks incredible. I would challenge you to find another GameCube game that is aged better than this game graphically. The expressive cartoonish characters are a joy, and sailing the vast oceans and seeing islands in the distance can create some breathtaking moments. Wind Waker, particularly on the Wii U, is one of the most eye-pleasing games I've ever witnessed. Graphics and art style get a 5 out of 5. The cel-shaded cartoon style of Wind Waker is just a joy to look at, and very few things take away from it. There are a few moments where you will see some painted on trees or something, but nothing that truly takes away from its greatness. This is of course all topped off with one of the most epic visuals I've seen in a video game, in the final battle when Hyrule is literally being drowned mid-battle. Very few games in general rival this amazing art style. For the gameplay, let's first take a look at sword combat. It's definitely a nice upgrade from the N64 era, feeling generally more fluid. The parry system was also introduced to allow for an extra element of counterplay. The parry system can be a lot of fun and is ultimately necessary in defeating Ganondorf in the final battle. Another neat feature in the Wind Waker is being able to pick up enemy weapons to use in combat. This is especially neat when you lose your sword at the beginning of the game. This is also useful for taking down things like pillars or getting a strong hit on an enemy. Unfortunately, you can't take these weapons beyond the room you find them though. Items in combat feel just as smooth as you would expect, upgrading from the N64 era. Some nice gameplay conveniences including having the iron boots as an easily equipable item without pausing, and being able to switch between arrow types on the fly. Some of those conveniences that we didn't see back in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. The sailing is another major gameplay aspect. You use the King of Red Lions to travel from island to island, and use the grappling hook as a salvage arm to pick up hidden treasures. The boat also uses your bomb item as a cannon, which is your main form of attacking on the open sea. The gameplay gets a 4 out of 5. Sword combat feels like a definite upgrade from Ocarina of Time and Majora's, and still holds up well today. The parry system was a welcome introduction and can create some really fun moments. Sailing is generally fine but can definitely start to get tedious. This is especially true when it comes to things like marking your map, which can be a very long, painstaking journey if you intend to identify every single square on the map. Thankfully, the Swift Sail in Wind Waker HD makes the sailing process much smoother. Gameplay overall is very solid, just a shy away from greatness. The array of items in the Wind Waker include the Mirror Shield, Grappling Hook, Iron Boots, Boomerang, Bombs, Deku Tree, Bow, Hookshot, and Skullhammer. The game's instrument is appropriately the Wind Waker. The Wind Waker's main purpose is controlling the direction of the winds, but is also used for purposes including commanding companion characters and warping to other parts of the Great Sea. The standout item that works perfectly in tandem with the instrument is the Deku Leaf. Using the leaf to glide to different areas is an absolute joy. The direction of the wind is also something you'll want to be very mindful of when using the item, as you'll go further with the wind behind you. The Deku Leaf also functions to send a gust of wind to activate certain switches and affect enemies. Being such a fun item to use, it's no surprise we saw similar incarnations of this item in Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild. The grappling hook is another new addition. Hooking onto specific points allows you to swing to otherwise unreachable areas. While this item is a cool addition, having to watch the cutscene each time you latch onto a hook point does get a little bit annoying. I also think the hookshot just ultimately outshines this item. Other than that, most items are pretty standard with some minor tweaks from previous games. We had previously mentioned the iron boots were improved, but we did also see improvements to the boomerang that allowed you to have multiple targets at once. Looking at the perspective of being on the boat, the bombs function as a cannon for fighting enemy ships and the grappling hook doubled as a salvage arm for getting treasure. Finally, for the boat we have the sail. The normal sail is slow and requires the wind to be in the right direction to have any reasonable amount of speed. The HD version adds the glorious Swift Sail, definitely something you'll want to get as soon as possible in this version. Not only is it faster, but it will automatically have the wind behind you, so there's no need to ever change the direction of the wind. The items get a 3 out of 5. The lot of items is pretty standard with a couple new additions. Nothing outside of the Deku Leaf is insanely innovative, but the Deku Leaf alone makes it so that I really can't have this score any lower than a 3. The Wind Waker is a Zelda game that is near and dear to my heart, but when it comes to dungeons, I gotta get real. First of all, there's just not that many of them, but let's go through them. Dragon Roost Island hosts the fiery Dragon Roost Cavern. At the Forest Haven lies the Forbidden Woods. In the center of the map we have the Tower of the Gods, built to test the chosen hero. Headstone Island hosts the dreary Earth Temple, and Gale Island hosts the complex Wind Temple. The Forsaken Fortress and Ganon's Tower are also in the mix, but those almost feel like mini dungeons, and that's really about it. Don't get me started about the Fire and Ice Mountains. they're both about one room and just straight up don't count in my eyes. So we really only have 5 main dungeons and 7 if we're really being generous. Now you might be thinking, well, it's more about the quality of the dungeons than the quantity, right? That can definitely be the case, but when it comes to the Wind Waker, is the quality there? Yes and no. I don't think the Wind Waker has any bad dungeons, but I also don't think it has any truly great standouts either. The Forsaken Fortress starts as an annoying stealth mission and is barely a dungeon on your return visit. Dragon Roost and Forbidden Woods are fine, but nothing special in my eyes. The Tower of the Gods, while cool conceptually, gets bogged down by an annoying water mechanic and the infamous command melody. The command melody really starts becoming a problem at the Earth Temple and hurts that dungeon significantly. But the Wind Temple, this one is actually pretty good. If I had to pick a favorite dungeon, this would be it. But I don't think it's on the same level as other standout dungeons in previous 3D Zelda games. Dungeons get a 2 out of 5. There is no straight up bad dungeon in the game, but having both a low dungeon count and no standout dungeons really brings this category down. Let's first take a look at the regular enemies. We have some annoying ones like Peahats and Morphs, but there's also some fun ones like Dark Nuts and Moblins. Wizrobes can be super annoying, but once you get good at sniping them, they really aren't too bad. For the most part, I think the regular enemies are pretty solid. Moving on to the bosses now. Goma is a pretty straightforward fight. I think it was a cool idea to implement grappling Valu's tail to bring the rock down onto the boss. Definitely an element you don't see too often. Goma must not be too smart though. You'd think after it got hit with the rock for the second time, it wouldn't perfectly set it in place again. Immersion aside, Goma is a solid start to the boss fights. Nothing incredible, but not bad. Coming up next we have Kalidimos, a reminiscent fight of Baronade from Ocarina of Time. You use your boomerang to take down all the vines that hold up Kalidimos. It's nice that you can now select multiple targets with a boomerang, but you have to be quick since the vines do respawn. It's not the most amazing fight, but I do really love the Easter egg that they implemented. If you take some of the forest water with you and get to the boss before the time runs out, you can actually insta-kill him by pouring the water on him. Godan is where things start to fall off for me. Pretty much a less interesting version of Bongo Bongo from Ocarina. I've just seen this type of boss way too many times, and this variation, while cool for the theme of the Tower of the Gods, really doesn't bring anything to the table. Phantom Ganon appears a couple times throughout the game. It's some of that classic Zelda tennis that we all know and love. I always find it fun, but this is definitely not the most interesting variation of this type of boss. Helmarock King is a fight that is definitely a great set piece and ends up looking like a much cooler fight than it actually is. It can ultimately be a little annoying just waiting around while he flies. Dodging him is not really a challenge. Ultimately, this ends up just being a cool looking fight, but not a very interesting one. Jalhalla, the Earth Temple boss, is just kind of there. Shine the light on him, throw him into the spikes to break him into many pose, attack all the pose, rinse and repeat until they're all defeated. This is a fight that desperately needed another phase to make it more memorable. If nothing else, Mulgera has the most epic and fun boss music in the entire game. The fight itself is not too bad, but nothing groundbreaking either. The atmosphere is definitely what makes this fight feel special, although I must say the vibes I get from it really have nothing to do with the theming of the Wind Temple that it comes from. Puppet Ganon does not mess around. The first phase can definitely be tricky with how erratic he moves around. The spider phase is definitely the easiest, but still cool that you have to use the water's reflection to see where to position yourself. Finally, we have the snake phase. This is where things get real. You can slow him down with bombs and have just enough time to shoot a light arrow at his tail, but it can be really challenging to time it right. Sometimes the best route is to just hide in the corner and try to snipe his tail. Finally, we have Ganondorf. This is, in my opinion, the coolest set piece in all of Zelda. Set at the top of Ganon's tower, the Great Sea flooding Hyrule mid-battle, and an intense encounter between Link and Ganondorf. Zelda is also playing a key role in the fight too, shooting the light arrows to reflect off your shield. Overall, the fight can be challenging if you don't know what to do right away, but ultimately, it ends up being just a little too short, still epic nonetheless. The bosses and enemies get a 2 out of 5. The regular enemies are pretty good, with ones such as the Dark Nuts being a major highlight. The bosses, though, are definitely more on the lacking side. The definite exception here are the final fights with Puppet Ganon and Ganondorf. The Wind Waker has plenty of side content. Due to the lower dungeon count and thus lower amount of heart containers, there's a ton of heart pieces to find. Many islands house puzzles to pick up collectibles. There's also a ton of treasure maps you can use to find tons and tons of treasure. There are also side quests which include a trading sequence, watering the withered trees, and if you really want to go crazy, you can collect all the figurines. This entails taking a picture of every character and enemy in the entire game. And if you do a second quest, you can actually continue your figurine collection through that playthrough. Side content gets a 4 out of 5. The high rating is mostly due to the sheer volume of tasks needed to be done to 100% the game. There really is just a ton to explore, and it's daunting to even think about exploring every nook and cranny of the map. It doesn't quite reach a perfect score due to the vast majority of the rewards not being too exciting. Most of the time, even some of the most involved tasks still just reward a heart piece. The music of The Wind Waker is nothing short of spectacular. From the moment you hit the title screen, you're in for just a magical experience. I'm no expert when it comes to music, but the Wind Waker soundtrack just flows together like no other game I've seen before. On top of that, I really don't think there's a single bad track in the game. Some of the best tracks include Outset Island, Mulgara's boss theme, Windfall Island, The Great Sea, the pirate theme, Forest Haven, and of course, who can forget the fan favorite Dragon Roost Island. I really can't gush enough about how much I love this soundtrack. One moment I'll never forget is playing this game for the first time and taking that first trip down to Hyrule, pulling the Master Sword and hearing the somber rendition of the Hyrule Castle theme. The first Zelda I ever experienced was A Link to the Past, and the Hyrule Castle theme is what sucked me into that game. Wind Waker's Hyrule Castle theme was that first hit of nostalgia that just really put the soundtrack over the top for me. Unsurprisingly, the music gets a 5 out of 5. It's just fantastic and nothing else really needs to be said. Just go listen to it. The pacing of The Wind Waker is far from perfect. I think the very beginning is fine, but I never look forward to the annoying stealth mission at the Forsaken Fortress. Things go rather smoothly from there. You're definitely a bit constrained through the first few dungeons, but that never really bothered me, and I feel that the story and the gameplay flowed nicely. Once you're given the task to take on the Earth and Wind Temple, things get a bit weird. The game goes from holding your hand to just straight up letting you go. This can definitely be a bit jarring, but once you get a handle on things, it's not too bad. If you played this game before, you probably have noticed by this point that I still haven't talked about the Triforce quest. Well, there's no better section than this one. Once the temples have been completed, the only thing left is the infamous Triforce quest. The game just really stops, and it's up to you to chase down Triforce charts and Triforce pieces. Now, these Triforce charts can't be read right away, so you need your buddy Tingle to decipher them for you, and on top of that, they're not exactly cheap to decipher. A key item you need to complete this quest line is on the ghost ship, and of course, you need a chart to even locate that ship. So this whole section of the game is rather annoying, and probably one of the most hated parts of any Zelda game. Now, the HD version, I must say, does a pretty good job of cleaning this up. They took away some of the charts and just gave you the pieces instead, which significantly shortened the whole process. It's not a perfect fix, but I think it's a significant improvement. Pacing and game flow gets a 2 out of 5. The early game suffers a bit from a not so exciting stealth mission. There's also jarring moments in the mid-game going from a more linear experience to a more open one, and lastly we have the Triforce quest, which brings the end game to a screeching halt. It's cleaned up on the HD version, but still not exactly riveting gameplay. So we've gone through every category, and here is a recap of each score. Averaging out, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker gets a 3.6 out of 5, a pretty solid rating overall. We covered Phantom Hourglass in a previous video, so here is where we stand with both games. As we rate each game, we'll continue to populate this list and slowly build the ultimate Zelda game ranking. Make sure to let me know in the comments how you would score each of the categories for The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.